Hi, welcome to Chess-Based Workshop. My name is Steve Lopez. Thank you for clicking the link and joining us. Before we begin today, I must congratulate Vishy Anand for successfully defending his world title. It happened, Game 12 was 2 days ago as I record this. And congratulations, sir. You scared me after Game 1, but from then on it was all good. Especially, by the way, Game 4. By the way, y'all, if you haven't played through Game 4 of the 2010 World Championship yet, you absolutely have to play through it. It's one of the wildest things I ever saw. And after that game, it has elevated Vishy to a whole new plateau of cool in my eyes. I mean, that game was awesome, stone awesome. All right, back to the subject at hand here. We've been talking in the last couple of chess-based workshops about analyzing games. Full analysis and full analysis and blunder check were what we looked at in the last couple of workshops. This time around we're going to look at compare analysis. And what compare analysis allows you to do, very simply, is have several chess engines analyze your game so that you can compare their analysis. That, oddly enough, is why it's called compare analysis. So let's see how you do this. First of all, you want to go to the game list, as we've done before. You want to highlight the game that you want. I have a whole bunch of games here. We're going to highlight Game 10. That's the one we want to have analyzed. Once again, this is just a game I plucked randomly out of one of our correspondence databases, and I changed the player names to initials because, again, it's not my intent to embarrass anyone here. I just want to show you how this function works. So we have this game that was an email correspondence game. To analyze it using compare analysis, once we've highlighted the game we want, we go to database and we click on compare analysis, and you'll see it says compare the analysis of different engines, just like I said a minute ago. Click on it and you get this dialog, and I'm going to take something out of it here so I can show you something here in a moment. What it will do is when you fire this thing up, you can have as many engines as you want analyze the game. Now, before you go wild and start putting piles of engines in here, you need to understand something. One of the things we talked about over the last couple of weeks is that when you have an engine analyze a game, it does take a little bit of time. Typically, it takes, when I have an engine analyze a game, at 45 seconds a move. Depending on the length of the game, obviously, if it's a 150 move epic like Ben-Hur, it's going to take longer to analyze than a 20 move miniature. But generally, when you're talking, in your 40 to 60, 70 move range, your typical game, it's going to take, on my machine, at 45 seconds a move, about 2 hours to analyze a game. If you have 3 engines analyze a game, hence it will take about 6 hours, 2 hours per engine. So don't go nuts unless you have no use for your computer for the next few days. Don't go nuts and put 20 or 30 engines in there and have them all analyzed. And the other part of it is that's way too much anyway. You'll never be able to look through all that analysis anyhow. So I typically have 2 or 3 engines analyze a game when I use this. Now, why do you use compare analysis? It's because different engines analyze in different ways. Going back through chess-based history, for example, we used to carry a chess engine called Chess Tiger that was very, 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 very tactical to the point of sacrificing and throwing away material. Much like Vishy did in Game 4, it was a very sacrificial chess engine. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have engines like Shredder, for example, that play a very solid, almost defensive game. If Chess Tiger is Tau, Shredder is Petrosian, is the way I like to kind of word it. And so you have different engines that play in different styles. So you do get different suggestions a lot of times when you have different chess engines analyze a game. First of all, you need to set up your parameters. Let's look at these first because that's just easy to do. We've already looked at most of them. Side to analyze. Once again, I recommend both. The reason being that your opponent may have a way he could have smacked you down pretty hard. You're going to want to see that. You're going to want the engine to show you that. So I recommend that you use both. Storage, we've talked about before. If you use replace, for example, here I have Game 10 highlighted in our game list. If we select replace, it will analyze the game and then overwrite Game 10 with the new version that has the engine analysis. Append will add another game to the end of the database, which is what I've done previously. You notice there are 11 games in this database. When I did this earlier, I selected append and it added a new game. So we still have a fresh game which was unannotated, and now we have another game because I used append that has all of the engine annotations, which I'll show you directly.
So replace and append, and as an adjunct to this, we'll jump down here to erase old annotations. If you're going to if you have an annotated game, the Grandmaster or you or your buddy down the street or Mortimer Snur or whoever annotated, and you want to keep those annotations, don't check erase old annotations unless you use append instead of replace. If you use append, it'll leave your original game untouched and give you another game in the database. Whereas if you use replace, well, Mortimer Snur's annotations are going to get erased and be overwritten by the engine's annotations. So just be careful, okay, if you're using replace and append. If you use replace, be sure to, excuse me, if it's an annotated game, be sure to uncheck erase old annotations. We've discussed time and depth at length before. They are mutually exclusive. You can't have them both checked. It's one or the other. I prefer time. Depth tends to just choke the engine off at a particular point, whereas time, if it's a very tactical situation where there's a lot of forced exchanges, for example, depth will just cut that exchange off at 7 ply, whereas there may be 3 or 4 more swaps, and then there might be a long series of moves after that, and you're not going to see any of it because you choked it off after a certain point. Time, if it's one of those things where it's swap, 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 3 checks, and then there's a sequence of moves, because the checks and the captures are all forced, the engine goes through them and analyzes them very quickly before it gets to the meat of the position after all the mayhem, and where it has to look much more deeply in the position to see the quieter moves that follow. So that's why I prefer time over depth. I like to get as much analysis as I can. I tend to get more with time rather than with depth. Node count is an interesting little thing that we have not seen previously. What this does is and I did not check it when I ran this earlier, so I can't show it to you, but what it does, for every move of the game that an engine analyzes, it will give you the number of positions it looked at to come up with that evaluation, the total number of positions. What that allows you to do is check how many positions each engine has looked at in arriving at their evaluation. You can compare the number of nodes, the number of positions they evaluated, so you can see which engine, for example, analyzes more quickly than the other ones. So that's why you would check node count. Excuse me. To add an engine, you go over here to define engine. I've already added 2. I have Fritz and Ribka, and I'm going to add another one. Now, if you want to take an engine out, well, I'll show you that here in a second. I'll tell you what we'll do here. We'll add one first. We'll go to New, and we're going to add an engine to our list. So we go to New, and here's our scrolling list of all the engines that we have on our computer, and I'm going to scroll down and find Crafty by Bob Hyatt. 2301 is the version number, and we're going to set the hash table size to 256, so they're all using the same hash table size. Another thing that I find useful to do is to set different colors that the engine analysis will appear in the game score. Variation color. Click that button. I'm going to make Crafty's analysis orange. That just makes it easier to distinguish between the analyses of the different engines. I'll show you that here directly, but it is very useful to select different variation colors. So you select a color, select an engine, select hash table size, click OK, and here it is. If you decide you want to change something about a particular engine, for example, if I go back here to Ribka, I can edit, and I can change different parameters. I can change the hash table size, I can change engine parameters. Generally, I don't mess with those, but that's your list of all the different things you can change about the way, you can tweak about the way the engine thinks. You can also change variation color. If I decide I don't want this blue and I want a lighter blue instead, or some other color altogether, I can do that here by using Edit. Another thing you can do is if you decide you don't want Crafty analyzing the game, for example, is you can click Delete. Now, delete, that word panics people. Don't let it freak you out. It does not delete the engine from your hard drive. It just takes it out of this list. That's all it does. So they should probably use the word remove instead of delete. Delete is a red flag to a lot of people. I can click delete right now. There goes Crafty. Crafty has been deleted, but it's not gone from my hard drive. I'll show you. I'll click new, and we'll just go back and do it again. Here's Crafty 2301. Of course, I now have to reset the hash table size and change the variation color back to orange, and we're good to go. When you have the number of engines that you want, you have them all set up with the parameters that you want, have all of this set up the way you want it, you click OK, and off you go. and off you go. Walk away from your computer for a few hours. It's going to take a while. I had this run overnight. It took about 6 hours to do all the analysis, and I'll show you what your final result is. Click OK to let it start. I'm not going to do that now. As I said, it's like those cooking shows. We're going to pop the cake in the oven, go to a commercial, come back, hey, we have a cake. So I'm going to show you the cake right now. We go to this game, fire it up, here we are. You're going to notice something right away, and that is 1d4 was the initial starting move, and all 3 engines analyzed this move. Why did they do that? You will notice, and I didn't show you this, so we'll go back and look at it again. When you go into the compare analysis dialog, there is no threshold setting. There's a reason for that. The engines will give you analysis of every single move of the game, period. They don't stop when they hit the end of the opening book, as they do with full analysis and with blunder check. You know, the engine starts analyzing at the end of the game and moves backwards toward the beginning of the game, but when it hits a move from the opening book, it stops and puts up an annotation that says last book move. It happens in those other 2 analysis modes, not in this one. These engines will analyze every move of the game. So keep that in mind. You'll notice, though, that they are in different colors. I had Fritz set up in a green, Ribka in blue, Crafty in orange. We can scroll down, well, we just play through the game, and every single game we're going to have a number of different moves. Where I'm looking to go, if I can find that spot again that I was looking at earlier. Which I should have written down, but never having been bright, I totally forgot to write down what move it was. What you can do is right here. This is a good spot to go to. I think this might have even been it. Yes, it is. We get to this move, 15, Queen H5. In fact, we'll go back and move. We'll show you. Black makes this move. What we notice, and this is I found this to be interesting, is that all 3 engines agree that this is, in fact, the best move in this position. So congratulations, Mr. PS, you got the correct move in that spot according to these chess engines. As you play through the variations, first of all, they're in different colors, name of the engine, variation, and the analysis at the end of the variations. The analysis comes up at the end after 25 Queen D2, for example. Fritz says that white is ahead by nearly 1/2 of a pawn, 43/100 of a pawn, nearly half of one. Ribka, on the other hand, comes up with a different position. Says that white is ahead by not quite 1/4 of a pawn. Instead of a half, it's about 1/4, 20/100ths of a pawn. Crafty comes up with a much shorter variation, gets to this point, and says that black is actually winning by 3/100ths of a pawn. So here's where we're comparing analysis. Queen H5 is the correct move in this position according to all 3 engines. But when you play through the rest of their analysis, you reach position with a different evaluation. White is ahead by nearly half a pawn in Fritz's evaluation, assuming best play for both sides. Ribka says with best play for both sides, white will wind up ahead by about 1/4 of a pawn, and Crafty actually puts an almost dead even with black having a very, very, very tiny edge of 3/100ths of a pawn. So we can see already that their analysis differs, their analysis varies. So this has already been an interesting exercise. Then as you play through the actual variations, what you find out is that from black's 15th move through white's 17th move, all 3 engines agree. The variance comes when Crafty at black's 17th move decides G4 is the best move. The other 2 engines actually agree that bishop B6 is the best move. And in fact, if you continue through the analysis, they, I think up through move 20, actually a little later, 21, 22, here it is. Both Fritz and Ribka have the same variation up through white's 22nd move. We can see where it winds up being the same position. I'll click back and forth and you see the board doesn't change. But in this position, Fritz says that black should play the king to here, whereas Ribka says the king should come here. And then there's a different variation from that point, obviously. So you will run into positions where engines absolutely agree. Here is the best sequence of play from this point up to some point of variance. And in this case, they absolutely were in lockstep through about 7 moves or so. So that's a little interesting spot. But you can see what you wind up with when you run compare analysis. You get 3 engines analyzing the game, giving you their opinion on every move of the game. They don't skip moves. They don't. There's no threshold setting. They don't recognize where the opening book starts and stops. They just give you every move of the game right from the end. They start at the end, of course, and they work backwards the whole way back to the beginning, and you get analysis of every single move of the game. This is useful for players who want to get more than one opinion, particularly if you have a couple of different engines that are very wildly different in the way they analyze. For example, as I said, Chess Tiger would be on the tactical end, Shredder would be on the strategic or positional end. Another thing is, if you are a chess engine developer, if you are a person who programs chess engines either as an amateur or a professional, by the way, let me go to my engine list. You see a ton of engines in my list here. There's a whole lot of them. These are all engines you can get on the internet. These are ones that have been put up there, most of them have been put up there for free by people, either Winboard compatible, which you can use in the Fritz interface with a little bit of tweaking, or UCI compatible, which you can directly import into the Fritz interface without any additional tweaks at all. And these are all additional engines that I have that I can use. So let's say that I'm an engine programmer and I want to see how my engine stacks up against a couple of guys that I know that are also programming their own engines. You can import them all and use compare analysis and have them analyze existing games to compare, for example, the node count. If I had checked node count, which I did not do before I ran this game, in addition to this evaluation information here at the end of each variation, you'd also have a number that tells you how many positions the engine looked at to arrive at this analysis. You could compare the speed of your engine against the speed of your competitor or friend's engine. So there's additional things you can do besides just analyzing your own games with this. If you're a programmer, you can also do some things, compare your engine's performance against some others by having them analyze games. So there's a whole bunch of uses for this thing. It's a really cool tweak, but once again, to get to it, you go to the game list and click the database tab, highlight the game that you want to analyze, click compare analysis, and then you have all your parameters, set it up, and click OK. I will stress one more time before we go, however, that if you set a time setting as I did of about 45 seconds a move on this piece of hardware that I'm running this on, it takes about 2 hours for an engine to analyze a game. Just remember, if you have one engine analyzes 2 hours, 2 engines 4 hours, 3 engines 6 hours. If you put a whole big long list of engines here, you're not going to be seeing your computer for about a day or two. So please don't go crazy with this thing. Typically 3 engines is about all I'll ever use to analyze a game. That's a good overnight analysis, but again, it's up to you. Just be aware that the more engines you add, the longer it takes to get to that final result where it's all done and the game is analyzed. And the other thing, by the way, is if you go hog wild with engines, look here, 3 engines takes up about a third of the notation pane, or almost half. If you had 10 engines, you'd have to keep scrolling up and down to be able to see the analysis of all the different engines. So I think that after a certain point you get to information overload, you don't really need all that. So it's up to you. Again, the tool is there. I've just showed you how to use it. Go crazy, have fun, and we'll talk about some more features of Fritz12 next week. So until next time around, please do have fun.